Is the United States a monarchy? Is it a dictatorship? Is it a democratic form of government? Or is it a republic? This is a very important question, and it's not your fault. Don't need you to answer right now. Think in your heads, what would you say? Because you've been trained to say one thing, right? And you've been trained for the past 100 and started in the universities way back in like the 1850s, 1860s, where they started calling the United States a democracy. We're not a democracy. The founding fathers hated democracy. Think of your Pledge of Allegiance, okay? I pledge allegiance, if you even know it anymore. We did it since first grade. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the democracy? No. To the republic for which it stands. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So this is a republic. What's the difference? Okay? The United States is a republic based upon a constitution and a Bill of Rights. The reason that makes a difference is in a democracy, the majority can take the rights away from the minority. Not in a republic, a constitutional republic with a Bill of Rights. Even the minority is protected against the majority. You have rights. And what are those rights based upon? Like you're hearing a lot of stuff nowadays about racism, right? And I think we shouldn't be racist, but they never explain why. Why shouldn't we be racist? What does it matter? Why is it wrong to be racist? Because God says so, okay? And they never put God in. They want to have these rules, and that's why they ended up twisted by the time they come out, and they end up completely opposite. Our government is based that all people, all humans before God have rights. The founding document, your Declaration of Independence, says it this way. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are mankind, man and woman, all of us, that all men are created, equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And what inalienable means is that I don't have the right to take them away. You have a right to life. The Bible says that. That's the Constitution. Sorry, that's the Declaration, right? And the Constitution, you have a right to life, all right, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So you have a right to think freely, to worship freely, to live freely, okay? Regardless of your race, creed, so. Okay, you get it? That's right there in the founding document, and in the follow-up, 11, 12 roughly years later, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Now, we're going to go to an understanding that the founding fathers hated the term democracy. They hated it, despised it. They called it mobocracy, where the mob rules when you remove a republic. They based our laws, all of them, on the fact that God exists, and that God, which they don't want to tell you that now, and that God gives, and it's been some decades, quite frankly. It started in the 1950s in mass, where they would go after God and after the Bible. At the Constitutional Convention, just to show you we mean what we say here, the most liberal member, when they got together and decided, we already had a framework that had been in place for 11 years after we won the Revolutionary War. Now, I'm not sure if you know or how much study you've done in the Revolutionary War with George Washington and the rebels against the empire. That's really what it is. I'll try to relate it to something. The rebels stood up against the British Empire, which was the mightiest empire in the history of the world. They controlled more land, ultimately, than any known empire. Okay, Britain at one point in the 1800s, later on, would own almost all of China, almost all of India, the huge portions of Africa. They still run Canada, South America, parts of South America, and so on and so on. It was unbelievable, the British Empire. And this little colony stands up and says, we're going to, starts with taxation. And they said, we want representation. They're like, no, you don't get no representation. You get what we tell you to do. And so the people stood up and they said, no taxation without representation. And they decided, ultimately, took decades, we're going to form our own government. And that's what leads to the Declaration of Independence in 1776, which states, again, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Obvious is another word. It's just, it's obvious that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain non-removable rights, because when you remove those rights, you get God mad at you, and that's fact. God is for liberty. The Bible's the first. In fact, it's on the Liberty Bell, that where through Moses, God says, proclaim liberty to the nations. It's all over the Old Testament. It's all over the New Testament to proclaim liberty to you, okay? So now we go to the Constitutional Convention. The U.S. has won. They beat the empire. Woohoo! It was a miracle, by the way. Absolute miracle. We should never have won that war, okay? But God intervened on our behalf, and the United States would rise. And as they began, they had 11 years before we had a specific constitution, right? So at the Constitutional Convention, they're not making any progress. It's really hot in Philadelphia at that summer. They are arguing with each other, not getting anywhere. There was no air conditioning back then, so it was near 100 degrees in Philadelphia with high humidity. These guys in these incredible suits, and they wore them, and would go into this meeting, and so at a certain point, after like weeks of debate, they're not getting anywhere. The most liberal founding father, you know his name, it's all over the place, you probably do, okay? He was considered the most liberal, and believe me, in his younger years, he had a raucous lifestyle. But in the preceding decades, you get older, you get wiser, and he comes back to God, right? And so, lo and behold, Benjamin Franklin stands up at the Constitutional Convention and he gives this speech. Now, I'm going to read it to you. It shows that, honestly, from the time of the Founding Fathers, we've gotten dumber. The Founding Fathers, most of them could speak multiple languages, mathematics. They were brilliant. Most of them were brilliant, okay? And so it's going to sound a little funny at times, but it's very eloquent. And I want you to hear what the most liberal person at the Constitutional Convention said was the reason they weren't getting anywhere. Okay, Benjamin Franklin stands up, and this is recorded by James Madison. The small progress we have made after several weeks, 4 or 5 weeks, close attendance and continual reasoning with each other, our different sentiments on almost every question. I'll just sum it up. We indeed seem to feel our own want of political wisdom. Since we have been running about in search of a government, we have gone back to ancient history for models of government and examined the different forms of these republics, which, having been formed with the seeds of their own destruction, now no longer exist. And we have viewed modern states all around Europe, but find none of their constitutions suitable to our circumstances. In this situation of this assembly, groping, as it were, in the dark to find political truth and scarce able to distinguish it when presented to us, how has it happened, sirs, that we have not hitherto once thought of humbly applying to the Father of all lights and illuminations and understandings? That's God. It's a flowery, very flowery way of saying God. In the beginning of with Great Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayer in this room for the divine protection. Our prayers, sir, were heard, and they were graciously answered. All of us who were engaged in the struggle must have observed frequent instances of superintending providence in our favor. That's just a fancy way of Ben Franklin saying God came down on our side. When we should have lost, somehow we won. To that kind of providence, we owe this happy opportunity of consulting in peace on the means of establishing our future national felicity. Just means national government, guys. And have we now forgotten that powerful friend, meaning God? Have we now forgotten that powerful friend? Or do we imagine that we no longer need his assistance? I have lived, sir. He was 80 years old at this time, guys. I have lived, sir, a long time. And the longer I live, the more convinced proofs I see of this truth. God governs the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, that's what Jesus said. He's quoting Jesus. We have been assured, sir, that if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it possible that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings, the Bible, that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this, And I also believe that without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of the Tower of Babel. Okay, so here's what happened. So that's Benjamin Franklin's own words. He quotes the Bible. He quotes Jesus Christ. And he says, if we don't ask God in, we're going to fail. This whole thing it'll never get off the ground. So what they did was they began to make a proposition for prayer, but they didn't even trust themselves to pray. They canceled the meeting, went out into Philadelphia, and found pastors that they trusted to pray over them. Now, your Congress, from May 1st, 1789 on to this very day, Congress does not begin, the House or the Senate, without a prayer to God. They have a chaplain who comes in, and that's been all the way back to Benjamin Franklin. They have a chaplain who comes in and prays over them. Until modern times, and I mean just the last 15, 20 years, almost every one of those chaplains was a Christian pastor. Okay? They didn't mean, hey, we need a Muhammad imam to come in, or hey, whatever, a Buddhist Hindu to pray over. No. They knew he was the God of the Bible, and his son was Jesus Christ. And this is your founding fathers who said, we will not begin a day's work in this Congress to this day without prayer to Almighty God. So this is stuff you will not get in your history books, but it is the history of your country. And so and you need to bear it with honor, because they're trying to take it away from you. The reason you have rights is not because if government is God, you're screwed. Because Nazi Germany, communism, they're all tyrannies. They're different forms of tyranny. And they came about when we removed God from the government. Okay? Doesn't work. There's no such thing as separation of church and state. The Founding Fathers never said it. Okay? It's quoted in a conversation that Thomas Jefferson had in a letter to some Anabaptists at the time. Very big words. I know a lot of that you don't understand. It's okay. But there is no such thing in any government of separation of church and state. Somebody's beliefs are going to run the government. Somebody's religion is going to run the government. What's been happening over the last 50 years and 60 years, 70 years, you were born into it, it's not your fault, is a powerful, sinister spiritual force has risen, and it's begun to remove our Christian moorings from us. Your heresy, God in heaven, it is a heresy. Your legacy, that's your heritage that they're stealing right now. Right now, they're stealing it, and they want to tear it down. But God is greater, just as Benjamin Franklin talked about. Time and time again, it should have gone the other way. But we cried out to God, and God turned it to our favor. So don't despair. Know your government. Your government is a republic. It's a republic which is unique in all the nations on the earth. No nation on the earth has this. Nobody has this, okay? It's a republic based upon a Bill of Rights that is based upon the fact that God exists. And next study, I'm going to quickly highlight the Bill of Rights, okay? Because it's a miracle you got the Bill of Rights, even amongst our founding fathers. I'm going to tell you the most important founding father after George Washington, because he fought the war. He led the fight in the war, so he's got to be number one. He is the father of our country, and you need to study Washington. I'll put some things together on that, but we're going to study the Bill of Rights next. Won't keep you long. You're a republic, not a democracy. Even Trump falls for this. Love him to death. We're not a democracy. Democracy is mob rule, where it's as one of the founding fathers said, it's two wolves and a lamb voting what's for dinner. Okay, two wolves and a lamb voting for what's for dinner. Okay, guess it's going to be the lamb. Trust me, they're eating lamb that night. That's what the founding fathers feared. They hated mob rule, hated mobocracy. They knew that we had a God-given right to think freely, to live freely. And that's what they fought for, and many died for over the past 240, 50 years. And they're trying to steal your legacy, your heritage as an American citizen. Do not let them.